Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about the structure of a typical dissertation project, and this will work whether you're writing at undergraduate level or the master's level. In the last video I made, which I'll link below, you can find out roughly what I think you need to do as you start to make the initial proposal. By now, you're at the point where you've got your topic and you're ready to start writing your dissertation. On screen now is the typical structure. Minor variations of this are possible and very much depend upon the topic, the sort of data you have, and the research methodology that you choose to use. But this is a very typical structure that you can adopt. In your document, top to bottom, you'll start with an abstract. That's an overall summary, which is 3 or 4 sentences, sometimes a little bit longer. For a typical dissertation project that may go up to 9,000 words, you'll limit this to about 3,000 words. If your project's about 6,000 words, you want to be somewhere around 150 to 200. Write this last. You don't write the dissertation in the order that people read it. That's a common misconception, and if you work intelligently, the whole thing's easier. The first major section or chapter is the introduction, and in a very similar way, you can start the dissertation by writing the introduction, but you'll have to come back to it at the end. As you're starting it, take the ideas from your research question and research objectives and spell them out in the introduction. Give that broad initial context, that very broad introduction to the area, what I want to do, how I'm going to do it. That's the content of the introduction. The first big job you have to do is the literature review. And in the last video, I suggested you do what's called a scoping literature review. Now you're going to have to write the literature review in full. This will be the first section that you write from start to finish. So in the literature review, you've got a couple of jobs that you need to do. You need to spell out what is known already about your topic. So here you are going to do a lot of library research to find sources. Your job is to find the key ideas from the most important seminal sources and the more recent ideas from more recent publications. A good literature review is a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You should show where sources agree with each other and where sources disagree with each other. So you need to compare and contrast. Given this, it might take a couple of drafts to get that section right. If you are really coveting a distinction mark here, and I truly hope you are, we would hope that you show some element of criticality in the way you assess some of the sources. If there is an obvious deficiency in a source that you're surveying, spell this out, bring that out. That is the criticality. If an old author very obviously neglects something that later authors add, highlight that when discussing the older source. That's showing criticality and it's also showing depth of research. That's important. We need to be seeing that. I tend to find a lot of students cite websites, they cite textbooks in the literature review, and okay, you can do that. But I love it when my students cite journals, grey literature, and books that aren't textbooks, higher level sources. Good quality sources really, really help lift the standard of your work. Now, a lot of my students know that I'm not very keen on AI, and I certainly don't want you to use AI to do your writing. But there are some good AI tools which help you find papers. The two that I really like are called Connected Papers, and there's one called Consensus.ai. These, I think, are actually quite helpful in speeding up the process of finding papers. So, Connected Papers shows you articles which have cited other articles. So, if you know the seminal work, you can find more recent work. Consensus is a little bit different. You ask it a question, which is yes or no. It will find articles that say yes and articles that say no. So it helps you find articles that give two sides of the argument. This is important to do in a literature review, and if the AI speeds you up, that's not a bad thing. Use AI for the search as a tool to help, but don't use it to write the literature review. That's two different things. The next section that you need to look at is the methodology and the data section. And we're coming to the point where you're getting very specific about what you want to do. And you shouldn't really be getting all of your guidance from a YouTube video. You should actually get it from your supervisor. So, this is the last section I'm actually going to talk about, because I worry if I keep on talking through the sections to the very end, I might lead you in a bad direction, and I certainly would never do that on purpose. So, after the literature review, you found out what we know, what other people have done. You now need to decide, what are you going to do? Now, one of the tools I love to give my own students is the method map by Mackintosh and O'Gorman. And I've put the diagram on the screen now. If you're following this as Mackintosh and O'Gorman suggest, you start from the very top and work your way down. So you start by making your assumptions about research philosophy. So you would start at the top with ontology, and ontology is the study of how individuals interact with reality. In objective ontology, you don't really control the world around you. You take reality as given. In subjective ontology, you're able to influence the world around you. And based upon this, you make assumptions about how knowledge is gathered or observed. If you are at the master's level and you're quite confident, you can start from the top. What I often tell undergraduate students to do is start in the data gathering section. Start by thinking, is this a quantitative project? Am I going to get numeric data and analyze it? Or can I produce a case study on a more specific item? So if my research question was, how do UK supermarkets use digital marketing to maximize revenue, I might pick a supermarket that I know more about than any of the others, and that becomes a case study. At times, I can do qualitative research, so I can find out, how do people make decisions, or how do people shape their own reality. Qualitative research is possible, but very often leads to primary research. It's not common in 12-week dissertation projects to do primary research, given the ethical considerations, the bureaucracy, and just the lack of time. But if you're lucky to maybe have a 24-week dissertation, this may be on the table for you. And based upon the data gathering that you're going to do, you can pick the technique. So some quantitative approaches, you just download data from a data set and you pick an analysis approach. So I'm now at the bottom of the methods map. That might be a relationship test, so a t-test, a linear regression. If you're a bit more advanced, you can do structural modeling, VAR, etc., etc. If you're doing something more qualitative, you're going to be looking at thematic analysis. You'll have to undertake coding. If you have done primary research and it's likely to be interviews, you're now in disclosure analysis. If you've done a survey, which is primary research, you're more likely to have asked a mixture of question types. And in fact, you have what's known as mixed methods research. So you'll do some deductive analysis and some inductive analysis. The methodology is very specific to you and what you're doing. The methods map is a good hint at what works with what. So if you start on the left, you finish on the left in the diagram. If you start on the right, you finish on the right. If you're working down the middle, you keep going down the middle. That's how you read the methods map in Macintosh and O'Gorman. If you don't like this approach, there's the Research Onion approach in Saunders. This is a bit similar, but a little bit more friendly to some people. Do check that out. There'll be tons of copies in every library that you can think of. It's a very famous book. At this point, I don't want to say too much, because in this section, you're going to lay out the method and the data you have. You'll describe the data you have. But at this point, you really need to be talking to your supervisor, who hopefully is a researcher themselves and has practical understanding of this. I don't really want to say too much more in a video because I'm conscious that I can talk to you, but you can't talk back. You know what you want to write on, but I don't. So at this point, have an idea what you're going to do and take this to your supervisor. See if he or she agrees with it. Once you have the methodology, you'll apply that methodology, you'll have findings, you'll discuss the implications, then all you've got is references and appendixes. I won't talk about the latter sections because I don't know what you're doing. I don't know your method. If you are one of my students, talk to me face to face rather than watch YouTube. If you are not my dissertation student and you are really stuck on these sections, there's probably much better stuff on YouTube. Make a couple of searches and look that up. Either way, I wish you all the very best with your dissertation projects. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we all get distinctions. Thank you very much.